Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be sitting down today with Dr. Chelsea Clinton for an important conversation at the intersection of global health and the social justice movement that has swept across our nation and the globe during the coronavirus pandemic. Dr. Clinton holds a Master of Public Health from Columbia's Mailman School of Public Health, as well as a doctorate in international relations from Oxford University, among her other degrees and accolades. As the vice chair of the Clinton Foundation, she leverages her leadership to help create economic opportunity, improve public health, and inspire civic engagement and service. Not only is she a tremendous teacher and creative thinker on a wide diversity of issues, but she also is an important and outspoken voice. She's a vocal advocate on some of the subjects that are most consequential for improving the quality of life in America and around the world today. We are honored to have her participate in Howard University's Homecoming 2020 festivities. Dr. Clinton, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Frederick, for having me. It is a real honor to be here with you today and virtually with you at Howard.
Yeah, these are interesting times. I want to start off by asking you about some of your life's philosophies. You live by a couple of mottos. Here at Howard, our motto is Veritas et Utilitas, which simply means truth and service. So we bring students here to get the truth, and we expect them to go out and change the world with their service. There are a couple that you have cited that you live by. One is to whom much is given, much is required, and another is get caught trying. Can you share how these words have helped you throughout your life?
Absolutely, Dr. Frederick. I was incredibly close to my mother's mother, to my grandma Dorothy, and also was close to my father's mother, my grandma Ginger, although she unfortunately passed when I was a child. And I start kind of answering your question there because they were so kind of foundational to my life, and really kind of both of those mottos really came from them. I mean, my grandma Dorothy very much believed kind of to whom much is given, much is expected, that we needed to always be kind of expanding the circle of blessings, which was another kind of wonderful motto of hers. And my grandma Ginger very much kind of instilled in my dad this kind of motto, but really this ethos to get caught trying, that it is always kind of better to do something than nothing. It's always better to push forward, if only to prevent us kind of falling back. And both my grandmothers had lives of extraordinary struggle and perseverance and persistence. And so I think, their words, as delivered to me and as passed down through my parents, mean so much to me, because I know they were so much more than words. They were very much kind of the principles that motivated their lives. And so for me, I try to make kind of whatever impact I can in whatever spaces I'm in, or kind of wherever kind of I aspire to be. So whether that is through my teaching at the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia, kind of through my writing, especially for young readers, as a citizen, as an advocate, and certainly as a mother, because I know my grandmothers are looking down on me, and I want to make them proud every day. And I want my children to grow up in a fundamentally different, kind of healthier, more equitable, more sustainable, more just world than what we have right now. So certainly I aim to get caught trying every day.
And certainly your parents epitomize both of those phrases, so you're well on your way. For those students who are not familiar with the Clinton Global Initiative University, can you explain what the Clinton Foundation program is?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick. And I just have to say, we're incredibly proud that we've had so many Howard students at what we call CGIU over the years. So CGIU was started now more than a dozen years ago to really bring together young changemakers across colleges and universities here in the United States and around the world. We've had more than 10,000 students representing almost every country in the world, but not quite. From across now thousands of universities and and college campuses as well. And every student, when applying to CGIU, has to apply with what we call a commitment, which really is kind of an action plan. What are they going to do? Often in collaboration and partnership with other students, sometimes kind of in their own universities and sometimes across universities, to solve a particular challenge, whether that is food waste on their college campus or how to help get more kind of middle grade young women interested in the STEM spaces, or whether it's ensuring that there can be robust and real educational opportunities for the millions of children who are internally displaced or in refugee settings across the globe. So every student comes with a commitment to action. And then we really work with the students to help them kind of flesh out that plan, to really think about kind of what should the architecture of the strategy be? How do they think about holding themselves accountable? Kind of what should the metrics be? What does success look like? And we really also try to help students connect with other students in the CGIU network, either that kind of are in the same class or kind of CGIU alums who may be tackling similar problems or maybe tackling quite different problems, but have similar approaches. We also have conversations on topics like, how do you think about kind of appropriate social media use for kind of raising awareness or kind of galvanizing action around your issue? How do you think about kind of what good mentorship looks like, both for yourself, but then also when you yourself will be a mentor? So really, it is one of the programs at the foundation that I'm most proud of, and kind of that certainly gives me profound optimism every year and really throughout the year, Dr. Frederick. And there are also a lot of students who very much are doing, I think, more than is required and are doing more than kind of just getting caught trying, because they're really already in the business of doing, and we're really proud to support them.
It sounds extremely exciting. Speaking of actions, the World Health Organization lists vaccine hesitancy as a major problem, and that's the reluctance or refusal to be vaccinated or to have one's children vaccinated against contagious diseases as one of its top 10 global health threats. Vaccine hesitancy is not a new phenomenon, but what is new is the power of social media and online forums that are spreading misinformation. How can we work together to gain the trust of the public to maximize acceptance of a potential COVID vaccine whose development seems to have been so politicized right now?
Oh, Dr. Frederick, I think that is such a crucial question, and one that I am really passionate about trying to answer collaboratively, respectfully, in a science-based way, and certainly in an action-oriented way. Because as I'm sure you know, given all of your work, depending on the survey, we're now kind of seeing data that, at least a third, maybe a half of Americans say they won't get a COVID vaccine, at least in the first year. And as you said, Dr. Frederick, vaccine hesitancy isn't a new phenomenon. In fact, it's quite an old phenomenon. I mean, there were people who didn't want to be vaccinated against smallpox, for example, kind of in the 18th, 19th, kind of 20th century, in the same way that we saw people who didn't want to wear masks during the 1918 flu pandemic. And so kind of these kind of public health measures that are so politicized, as you said, and I think really should not be, given the strong kind of weight of evidence. We know that these are not kind of new challenges. And yet, as you also said, kind of they have become, I think, somewhat more different and more challenging because of social media. And so, if we look at a study from last year that really traced kind of the online conversations on Facebook and related platforms around the MMR vaccine, kind of the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, overwhelmingly, across millions of impressions, whether kind of originating from kind of individual testimonials or articles or kind of in conversations online, unfortunately, overwhelmingly, the conversations were driven by kind of the anti-vaccine industry, kind of the people who really have made it their jobs and who very much have profited off of making it their jobs to spread misinformation and lies about vaccinations. We see kind of this most prominently with Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who fabricated the study that was in the Lancet now more than 20 years ago, kind of linking the MMR to autism, a study that was entirely debunked, and the kind of paper was stripped. And actually, Dr. Wakefield, I shouldn't even call him Dr. Wakefield because he lost his medical license in Britain. Unfortunately, while he is the most prominent, he's not the only person. There are quite a number of people who, until Google, YouTube, and kind of the other platforms started to prevent this, were really profiting off of their anti-vaccine content. And sadly, not only profiting in their own dollars, but profiting in terms of kind of building a community of people around them who listened to their misinformation. And so, unfortunately, in this COVID-19 moment, the people who were already kind of on the other end of kind of science and were really kind of anti-science and kind of anti-public health measures, have unfortunately amplified what they were already doing and have gained a lot of traction online. So we see this, and not only with Andrew Wakefield, we see it with kind of others like Del Bigtree and Robert Kennedy Jr., who also have really tragically, I think, kind of taken their messages global. And so we now see not only kind of growing vaccine hesitancy in this country, but much of the content that originates in this country kind of being added to, kind of repurposed, kind of given further oxygen, truly across the world. We see it in kind of social media conversations across Africa, across Asia, across Europe. And so, I think, Dr. Frederick, it's both what we need to do here in the United States to really kind of partner with and listen to and work with community leaders, local pediatricians, religious leaders who have real trust in different communities, kind of with families, with parents, to ensure that we are kind of always based in science, but really tailoring messages so that hopefully kind of people, parents, understand why it will be so important to vaccinate ourselves and our kids against COVID-19 in the same way it's really important to vaccinate ourselves, especially as we're like here in the autumn against the flu, kind of to ensure that our kids are still getting their routine vaccinations. We also do still need to continue to put pressure on the social media platforms, on Facebook, on Google, YouTube, on Twitter, to take down the anti-vax content. They've said that they kind of are being more rigorous about this, and yet we know there is still a very vibrant and flourishing ecosystem of anti-vaccine content. And so I think we have to do, kind of in the public health community, kind of, working with our public health leaders, like and including you, Dr. Frederick, to ensure that people are getting the information that they need. But we also have to continue to put pressure on the platform so that they are helping to ensure that people don't get the misinformation that too often is showing up kind of in their feeds and on their phones. In the early 20th century, when, I don't remember his first name, but when Jacobson, in Massachusetts refused to be vaccinated, and then the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it kind of granted Cambridge the right to require vaccination. I think this is right. I think that the people who did not believe that mandatory vaccination should ever be mandatory, that it shouldn't be a kind of public health tool, even kind of around schools or kind of other community spaces. I think at the time it was the largest protest outside the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court had ever had. So clearly this is, these are long-standing challenges in our country, unfortunately. Sorry I spoke for so long. Clearly I'm really passionate about this issue.
Extremely important point, and I think a very comprehensive response. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Frederick, for asking me a few questions. I'd really appreciate being able to ask you a few questions too, kind of in this time together. And I think we can unfortunately kind of segue from our conversation about vaccine hesitancy, although I want to come back to it, to really ask you about kind of the disproportionate impact that COVID-19 has had on communities of color, including in Washington, D.C., and really across the country, also in my home of New York City. And the fact that the pandemic is occurring in tandem with a more than 400-year-old overdue reckoning with racial inequality and systemic racism in our country, I think has increased awareness and reinforced the urgency of addressing kind of our public health crises of COVID-19 and racism, because racism is very much a public health crisis. And yet, I imagine for you as a doctor and as kind of the head of Howard, you're thinking about this kind of from the perspective of how are your students doing and kind of how is mental health kind of in your student population. And so could you just talk about kind of the mental health impact and kind of what you're doing, and also for anyone listening, how can we support you in that work?
Sure. The mental health impact is significant, and I start addressing that from a personal point of view. My daughter is a 14-year-old freshman, and she's had a difficult time during this period. She's very social, outgoing, and I think being at home, cooped up, it has been difficult. And then seeing these images on TV of Black bodies being demonized, murdered, it has all been very difficult. And so we've sought therapy for her, something that we've been open about. And I think likewise with our students here at Howard, they are experiencing similar things. We've expanded our counseling services. We've stood up virtual counseling throughout our system, expanded that so that we can ensure that students are making that connection. Also, having everyone interacting video conference, you lose something about our humanity. I have a saying that I kind of live by and I try to pass on to our students, and that is that the essence of the human condition is interaction, it's not isolation. And so this is an extremely aberrant circumstance that we're in, and we have to do things to make sure we combat that. So on a personal level, we have to encourage our students to be out and about safely, but even if it's getting out for a walk and just taking in the environment around us, we have to develop routines that break the monotony of what's taking place, and we have to pay attention. Also, because of the disproportionate impact of the pandemic, African American communities have been affected significantly. So you have young people who have suffered some personal family losses through the deaths of family members, and that also is a different type of trauma as well that will have a longer term impact, and something that we have to be thoughtful about. And as we bring students back, those are things that we're thinking about doing. We have a program at Howard called Healing at Howard, and that's something that we are going to ramp up, where we create safe spaces for students, faculty, and staff alike to talk about the things that may be affecting their daily lives and their daily ability to engage. And that's something that we certainly are going to double down in terms of having that activity when everybody does return to campus.
And Dr. Frederick, I would like to really, and would just really appreciate hearing your thoughts on the question that you asked me, which is how can we work together, and what do we need to do to earn the trust of the public really across the country to maximize acceptance of a COVID vaccine once we have one?
Yeah, this is an issue that I'm very concerned about. It prompted me to write a New York Times editorial about this, especially because of the history of the African American community's distrust with the medical community, which unfortunately has been well earned. The first thing that we have to do, I think, it points back to a point that you made, is we have to first ensure that we counteract the disinformation and misinformation with correct information. And so writing the editorial was about that, was about bringing the issue to the forefront. This week, Howard University has signed on to participate in one of the trials, the phase 3 vaccine trial. And I think that was an important step for us as a historically Black college and university. We insist on participating on the science aspect of it as well as the clinical aspect, so that when we bring people in from our community, We want them to use the trust that we have developed with them already and expand that into the trust for participating in a vaccine trial. And with the disproportionate impact that the pandemic has had, we have to have more African Americans participate in the clinical trial so that we can reassure the public and ensure that they disproportionately receive this vaccine so that we can really bring the incidence down. And as you pointed out, if some 30 to 50% do not take this vaccine, we could fall short of the herd immunity that's intended by vaccination. And that could be problematic in terms of how long we suffer through the impact of the pandemic. So it's absolutely critical that we get these communities vaccinated. And I think to work together on bringing the right information is where we need to start.
And I'm sure that, the students at Howard will be such an important part of that work. I mean, we do know that there are times where, thankfully, like parents and grandparents do listen to the younger members of their family. And so I think it is so powerful that you're participating in the science and the clinical side of one of the trials, and hope that message and the power of that message, and clearly the kind of relationship of trust kind of embedded in that message, reverberates out kind of through all of the families that are kind of in the Howard community. Dr. Frederick, you mentioned your daughter earlier, and I very much believe that we can and must move forward kind of through this time in our history. And I'm a parent. I have 3 kids, and just would really appreciate hearing what lessons you hope that kind of your children and all our children learn from this moment that they're living through.
I have a 16-year-old son who's a junior in high school and a 14-year-old daughter who's a freshman in high school. And so I first have to start by saying that I have learned a lot from them. My son has my name. I refer to him often as, Wayne 2.0. He's the improved version, the next version. And my daughter, who is already an activist, I think sometimes an attorney, and on other occasions an advocate, have really taught me a lot. They have been very concerned and empathetic about what's happening to people outside of their circle. I think that they have recognized and acknowledged their privilege, and recognized that they have to do more in order to assist those around them. And I think that has been something that has been great for me to learn, because sometimes we can be cynical about our young people. And I'm actually very optimistic about where our country is heading because of the 2 young people who live in my home. In terms of what I want them to learn, I certainly want them to understand that we are so interdependent, regardless of what form of privilege any of us may have. And that privilege can be taken away from us in the wink of an eye because of a pandemic, an unseen enemy. It can be taken away because of a tragic incident. And all of those things we are subject to. We are subject to illness, we are subject to tragedy, we're subject to betrayal, we're subject to mistrust. And so they have to keep the fundamentals of their humanity intact. And so I want them to continue to be good to other people, to be concerned about people whose circumstances they may never fully understand, and to recognize that they can't stand on the sidelines, but they must participate in that. So the thing that I hope that they will get from this is resilience, some grit. I think we actually are probably going to have one of the greatest generations of Americans because of what these young people are going through now. And I hope that whatever they do, they always dip it in a whole lot of love, because that ultimately is the answer. If we love each other in the manner in which our parents have tried to guide us to do that, I think they will be absolutely perfect in terms of what they get out of this and learn from it.
Well, they're certainly very lucky to have you as a father and a guide. Dr. Frederick, thank you so much for being in conversation with me today. And here at CGIU, we're just so excited about kind of being in the broader Howard family, and so proud of all of the Howard students that kind of have and hopefully will continue to be part of CGIU.
And thank you as well. We appreciate what the Clinton Global Foundation has been doing and what you in particular have been doing on the global level, but also in the classroom. To be a teacher at any point in time in your career is absolutely to do something that's one of the most selfless acts that you can participate in. So we appreciate what you do as well, Dr. Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick.
Thank you.
We're really appreciative of the time that Dr. Clinton took out to participate in our virtual conference for homecoming, and thankful as well to Dr. Frederick for his willingness to continue to be on the front lines of thinking about public health. For the remaining moments in our session, we will have two students who were, actually they're former students, I should say, both alum. So as we talked about a little bit earlier when we started the conversation, one of the things that we wanted to do today was to think about where there are intersections between the Clinton Global Foundation University and Howard. And Howard students have participated in CGIU over the years, and two of those students are on with us today. As you heard Chelsea Clinton talk about, the students are required to do what's called a commitment and a statement of action so that they can begin to affect change in the world. So joining us today are Tah-Jai Sharpe and Jelicia Diggs. So we invite Jelicia now to turn her camera on, and then Tah-Jai will join us shortly as well. And they'll both tell us just a little bit about the work that they have done since they were participants in CGIU, and tell us a little bit about the work that they are doing currently. So Jelicia, if you'll start for us and tell us just a little bit about your experience at Howard and your experience at CGIU.
All right, so hello everybody. My name is Jelicia Ross, formerly Diggs, and I graduated from Howard in 2016. And I will say that my Howard experience was one of the most pivotal for me because it showed me not only how to, care, but also how to lead and how to be a servant leader. And that's something that I've been able to take not only in my personal career and my personal development, but also in my overarching career interests as well. And to that same point, being able to be a part of CGIU, it actually happened right after I came back from studying abroad. So I definitely had a more global perspective as to what change looks like, what change can look like, and how to get it done. So in coming back and being able to do that and participate in that program with my team that was also built of students who had studied abroad with me, it really helped me take a lot of the ideas that I had and think through how to make them actionable and execute on them and continue to scale it even beyond what I or my team could individually do ourselves. So it's been a great experience on both fronts and truly appreciative to have been able to do so. And I can turn it over to Tah-Jai.
Thank you for that. Well, overall, Howard University has been a tremendous impact on my career as an international student from Jamaica. They've ensured that I've had a development skills through various experiences, from research exposure, going to different areas of the country, actually being able to expand my knowledge base as an international student, and a wide array of other people from the amalgam that's just involved in the work that's currently going on in America and in various countries. Howard has provided that unique experience that I pretty much couldn't get anywhere else, that I really appreciate for the past 4 years. I'm a recent graduate, so this just the experience Howard has encompassed over the past 4 years, I could never experience any other university other than the Howard University. I would say with my CGI experience, my exposure initially came, I just finished my CGI mentorship last year with Lauren, and she was a great mentor. It was an awesome experience with my commitment and what I wanted to do in mental health. And they really worked with me one-on-one and with group sessions where they catered towards what I wanted to do and focus on my interests. That was very instrumental in my nonprofit and the current work we're doing. It not just in the United States anymore, as I look forward to as I started to expand to like Jamaica and other regions. She was CGI as very instrumental in like putting my thought process together and figuring out what to do. Even though the mentorship experience ended, I've still been involved, just reaching out to my mentor to ask about how to just get some updates and help. So CGI, I'd really appreciate that year-long mentorship that CGI has provided, and overall Howard has encompassed my professional development through all the different experiences I've done as an international student, and as a just as a student going forward in my professional career.
So this question too is for both of you. The last year hasn't been an easy one. We were talking about this in the first session that we were in a little bit earlier, which was from civil rights to the Black Lives Matter movement, where there were activists who were former Howard students who were participatory in SNCC. And then we have a freshman, Tah-Jai Abdullah, for instance, who is in the LA chapter of Black Lives Matter. And we're thinking about how difficult the last 9 months have been, for instance. The country's faced a devastating disease, so we're in pandemic, rising unemployment levels, really thinking about an economic downturn that we haven't seen since the Great Depression, string of natural disasters. I'm from Louisiana, for instance, and it seems like every other week the state is being just really battered with natural disasters. How do you determine where to focus your efforts? Because there's so many things that you could really be involved in. And I know so many young people who are on now, because our freshman seminar class is watching, like young people everywhere watching, and we're recording and we'll post it a little bit later. How do you not get overwhelmed and try to solve all the problems of the world? How do you make determinations about where to focus your efforts, what work you can actually do, and at the same time, remain optimistic? You're muted, Jelicia. Yeah.
You know, that's with code. I'm trying to adjust to Zoom. What I will say though is, one, to your point, this is a very difficult time for so many people, myself included. And what I've been encouraging people to do first and foremost, before you even get into the action planning, is to take a second and check on yourself, check on your mental health, see how you are doing, take time to process all of the things that you're seeing. As mentioned in the earlier video, you know, you're seeing all of these videos of like Black bodies and murders and people are getting sick, and it's a lot to consume. So first things first, check in with yourself. And then from there, what has been instrumental and helpful to me is writing down all of the things I want to change, all of the problems that I see, all of the issues that are there, and picking 1 to 2 things that I want to focus on. And largely thinking about what resources are required to get it done, you know, what kind of network do I need to have. And once you have those 1 to 2 ideas, where I grew up, my parents would always say, you know, get your house in order. So like start with your community. Home can be a people, home can be a place. But start there and start having those conversations, start creating some actionable things that you can do from there. And even if it's only 1 thing a day that you do that moves you a little further in making the change that you want to do, that's more than enough. Because I think there are people who you're going to be able to directly change their lives. And there's others that you can be the catalyst for changing. So maybe you don't know them, maybe you never meet them, but the work that you do inspires them to continue to move in a similar direction. And then to the last piece about remaining optimistic, I think something that was really pushed home for me at Howard is you have a responsibility to make the world better. And that can feel like a lot when there are so many different issues, but also your take on how you would solve it, the different things that you have in mind, the different levels of empathy that you can relate to different communities that other people may not have. Those things exist in your head, and it's your job to make sure that you're able to put that out in the world. And whether that's telling your idea to 1 person or telling your idea to 100 people or 1,000 people, making sure that those ideas don't just sit with you, and just continuing to move forward from there. So in short, I say it's a challenging time, but we all definitely have what we need to solve it. And it's just a matter of getting down to, you know, the actionable items and being able to move out from there.
Ajay, same question.
Yes. Overall, I'd say the last 9 months has been a eye-opener for me, eye-opening experience. Travel, basically from the moment it occurred when I was still on campus, and then figuring out what was the next best step. Initially, that was very hard for me being international, and then figuring out do I need to be going back home, or how would I finish my senior year of Howard University? So it was kind of just mind-boggling the entire time. And then I just remember, like, one, the Howard community was definitely supportive in terms of us ensuring the safety of the international students and different students at the time. So that definitely alleviated a lot of the stress moving forward with the outbreak. And then I recall when I had to move back to New York with my relatives there, it was the way I was trying to figure out how would I manage to finish online school while working through my nonprofit. So it was very instrumental. Just, with professors especially, they were very open to like scheduling time with me, and I ensured I was able to finish everything on time, and it was able to graduate. And then when it came to just I know I reached out to my mentor because I know my nonprofit, we typically work in person with mentorship. And then we had to figure out how would we go about mentorship in this virtual space. So then I definitely took some time out just to think and just made plan by plan with my team and like what we look forward to doing with mentorship and how we plan to navigate the virtual platform. Personally, a thing that I took was a lot of um, mental health things that I did throughout this time, from meditating, going to walks. I've been like small conversation with my friends because I realized all of us are going through similar situations, either mentally where we feel isolated. So I'm ensured that I reached out to some of my friends, just have like small 5-minute conversation, checking with them. That helped them and that helped me myself to figure out that I'm not alone in this situation and there are other people having these problems. Then I would say what transpired was that I decided that the best step forward was to be proactive in everything that I do. So I looked and I saw there were a lot of courses going online for free learning and learning more about epidemiology. So I took a few of these online courses, got certifications in those to expand my knowledge base. And then even from moving forward to Howard, I still remain connected with professors and teachers that really wanted to see me succeed and thrive outside of just being at Howard for the 4 years. They were instrumental in just providing opportunities and letting me look forward for something, what's next. So I really appreciate the fact that I was able to plan accordingly and remain optimistic. I definitely had a lot of moments where I was crying and I was struggling, figuring out what to do and what was the best way forward, especially with some of the international policies that were being set at that time. And I just ensured that I remained focused and in charge of what I kept lead of my goals. And it made all the better sense as I moved forward, which led to my current opportunities and just continued work in my mental health nonprofit. I'd say the last piece of that was just really testing out what worked and did not work for me. Like first day I was like, okay, I will try just having a small waking up every morning and just getting back into the grind of just like figuring out what's the healthiest way mentally and physically to move about.
So we're presuming that a number of students might be interested in working with CGIU, and not just with CGIU, but also thinking about how they can be change agents. So walk us through your whole process of like, how did you find out about CGIU? What was your application process like? What was your specific project? Like how it came to life? Like, just like really tell us everything from beginning to the end, because I know what you guys did. You all know what you did, and the CGIU team knows. You guys did some really exciting projects as Howard students who were also fortunate enough to have the benefit of the mentorship and the seed work that happened. So take us from beginning to end with your projects.
I'll let you go because your memory is much fresher than mine from 2016.
Yeah, that's how I was about to go because I remember quick. So what I would say, recall up for the CGIU, it was a mentor in my nonprofit organization, and good friend of mine in the CARSTEM Scholar Program reached out to me to say, hey, I really think that you would be a good fit for CGIU. And then she nominated me for the CGIU, and then I applied last year. Thankfully, I was accepted to the CGIU program. And I remember speaking with my mentor, Lauren. The first step that we were doing, we're outlining our commitment to action. And that was pretty much with, I already started the nonprofit. So what I wanted to do was figuring out how to expand that nonprofit to different schools, how to connect with people. Storytelling was a great aspect of that, and expanding into different regions. Month by month, we had large group sessions and we had one-on-one group sessions. They were instrumental in terms of keeping focused with my commitment and figuring out what was the best method to actually execute my plans. CGI, I'd say throughout the months, I had opportunities to meet with other CGIU members within my region that were interested in mental health and education, and as well as international CGIU members, just meeting the different, like an amalgam of people, just to focus on our interest and passion. I realized that alone pushed me further in terms of what I wanted to do in CGI, to the point that we've actually met up with a few of the CGIU other participants from different universities. We had the DMV area meetup, where I was able to meet with like people from George Washington, Georgetown, and that was very instrumental in terms of what we focused on as advocates for change. Up to last week, actually, one of the members I met at CGIU, we had like a program. She's in Georgetown Graduate School. We had a partnership program between her mental health work, and my nonprofit last week Thursday, which showed how much of a community we've become over the years. Over the year, actually, my bad. I'd say the overall process, the only thing I'd say was kind of sad was the inability to go to Scotland. We're scheduled to go to Scotland in April, but due to the COVID outbreak, that had to cease the plan. But CGIU ensured that they had virtual webinars for us to attend, and that was also beneficial for us to continue to be involved, and just to know that my mentor is still open, just answer my question and being there for me, also push that experience along more.
All right, it sounds like there are a lot of similarities in our processes. So what I will say is, so my CGIU project actually was a product of studying abroad. So 2015, first time ever getting on a plane, left the country to study abroad. And it was definitely an uncomfortable, but also a learning experience. So going to a new country, being in Morocco, figuring out what it meant to be Black in Morocco, figuring out what it meant to be a woman, in a predominantly Muslim country, and like adapting to the cultural norms of that place. And so when I came back, myself and a couple of the other students that I remain pretty close with sat down and really dived into our experiences, the challenges that we had, the lessons that we learned, things that we wish we knew. And then from that place of empathy, thought through how could we make the experience for people who come to America even better. And that was truly what created our CGIU commitment, which was entitled SOURCE, an acronym for Support, Opportunities, and Assistance for Refugees. So we took the overarching issue of immigration and kind of narrowed it down further and further we created a program that would focus on recently resettled refugees in the Washington, D.C. metro area. That's where myself and all the other students were, that's where our networks were. And so we started from there. And the program that we created focused on 3 tenets. The first one being mental health under kind of the fluctuation of narrative exposure therapy. So thinking through how that can help people who come to the US work through a lot of the trauma, especially as you're coming seeking refuge. There's not a lot of resources, or we saw that there weren't a lot of resources provided to them in that space. So focusing one area on narrative exposure therapy, the second segment of it being cultural orientation. So we did some digging and research into what the existing cultural orientation for people seeking refuge that get admitted to the US is. and looked through it, found the strengths, found the weaknesses, and then continued to build upon that so it would make it even better, but also allow them to have an opportunity to expound upon subjects that they weren't able to previously. And then the last tenet was building community. So to your point around like not being isolated, making sure that people knew that they had, not even in their, just in their home countries, but also locally, people that they could look to for support, in addition to us and the resources that we were providing. So we actually comprised that into about a 2-week long session and ran a couple of the sessions in DC. And then that was able to kind of expand into a meetup group that still does exist. The individual creation team, our involvement varies. I now live in Atlanta and a couple of them have moved around, but the work continues to kind of scale for itself. And so I think that was probably one of the most important pieces of making sure that we created something that was sustainable and could continue to grow as we all kind of continue to grow and maneuver throughout our different careers. And then having the opportunity to go to the in-person CGIU event and meet people who had similar ideas, meet people who have very different perspectives and ideas on it, and being able to collaborate and continue to build that network helped us make what we were doing even better and even more impactful.
So what advice would you give to other young people who aspire to be proactive agents of change in their communities? I think you've done a little bit of that, but I think you guys are very inspiring. Your energy is also warming me as we are trying to manage the pandemic. We were joking with the recording that Chelsea's kids were in the background and she's like, they're so second nature, I don't even hear them. I mean, it just is a part of the space. And as we are here now, we're thinking about how easy this can be in person, but how difficult it is like on video. So I really do appreciate the energy that you're giving. So tell us about, how do you inspire young people who are really, really committed to being proactive agents of change, but just don't know where to begin?
So yeah, I'd say, and this is going to sound very simplistic, but just start. So pick something and move out on it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, be the idea that you end with, but find something that you're passionate about and start talking to people about it. Even if you don't have your idea of how you want to fix it, have a conversation or a brainstorming session with people around you and say, hey, I really don't like this particular issue, or I really would want to fix or work on social justice in this avenue, but I don't know what to do. Chances are they may have done something or they may have ideas to help you. But the biggest step is getting started. And I think I can speak for myself. I tend to want to be over prepared and want to have thought through all the potential scenarios and like overthink before I make that first step. And that delays when things happen. And so my lesson learned in what I took away from my CGIU experience, and then also the additional social justice oriented projects that I do now, is just start. Whatever step you take is further than you were the day before, and continue to get feedback, continue to allow people to critique it, continue to allow people, if somebody else takes the same idea that you do, that's great. That means you're inspiring people to get the work out. So just do it from a place of love. Don't do it from a place of ego, and just continue to get the work out, and it'll happen. Even if you don't see the fruits of your labor immediately, it will happen and you will make a change.
I'd say, this was a quote that I recently saw that I think that was instrumental in how I started in terms of my advocacy, was that you don't need permission or approval, you just need to believe in yourself. And that was one of when I was in freshman year, being an international student, I never felt like I could make a real impact or a big change in the community. And then actually taking the time out, I remember when I formulated the idea of a nonprofit, some of my friends were like, oh, you're not gonna be able to do it, blah, blah, just the senses of doubt they provided to me. And then I kept, even from my family members that provide that sense of doubt. But what I did was to keep at it, and I didn't need anyone's permission or approval, figure out what I wanted to do and what impact I wanted to make. I know coming to America was a big change in my life. Just, I've never been in the cold before. So I remember my first time in the snow. I was really cool. I never knew what that meant and the changes that involved in terms of mental health. And then I decided, hey, I really wanted to expand on mental health with a focus of mentorship. And that really pushed forward my involvement in terms of like starting an initiative. What I would say, once you start something, don't give up on that dream. Just keep at it, because it started off with just me starting this one idea to the point of where we have like a Howard University chapter, and we're expanding still to this day in like countries like Jamaica in terms of mentorship experience for mental health. There's gonna be roadblocks in their pursuit to how to create change, but you have to figure out ways to navigate these roadblocks. And one of the good things about people around you, especially adults, who people with exposure and experience, they can provide input of what worked for them and what didn't work. One of the things my mom always tell me is always to learn from someone else's mistakes. You can make your own, but you learn a lot from realizing what someone else made a mistake on. And that definitely helped me in terms of like knowing how to navigate what virtual space in terms of like Zoom meetings with mentorship online now, and actually just testing out things and never being afraid to fail, but always making the adjustments from there to actually improve. I think that's one of the best advice I could give to students at this time. And don't let it feel like COVID is, because of us doing a virtual, that doesn't mean you can't make change. There's other ways. You just need to figure out how to navigate these spaces and find people, a community around you that's willing to push that idea and your thoughts along.
Well, I want to say thank you to you both. I would also like to let everyone know, particularly the students on the line and the faculty who might consider introducing CGIU to their students. VP Bennett has put the information for CGIU in the chat. So the application process will open shortly. You can visit the website and learn more. And we are going to have some exciting news too about the meeting for 2021 in just a second. We have a question from Professor Derrikesh, who is in world languages here at Howard. She asks, how important is it to speak a world language in terms of what you do? Was it a requirement for you to be enrolled in CGIU? And have you found it beneficial to have the language skills that you actually are required to have as students at Howard?
So yeah, I'd say the Howard requirement to have the language helped. So even when I went abroad because I was studying Arabic, but when it came back to doing the CGIU initiative and making that commitment and building my team, especially given that we were going to be working with recently resettled refugees, I made it pertinent to find people who also spoke other languages than I did. So I had English and Arabic. There was someone else on my team who spoke French and Spanish. There was someone else on my team who spoke a variety of Southeast Asian languages. So it helped for my particular project because we were working with people who may, some did speak English, some did not. So that helped, but I do not believe it's a requirement for CGIU. And I think you can cater your commitment around whatever skill sets you have to offer.
So I'll wrap with just a little bit more. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tah-Jai. And then I'll give everybody a little bit of information about both of our speakers. And our provost will give us some closing remarks before we have about a minute and a half video with a special announcement about the spring 2021 CGIU annual meeting. So go ahead, Tah-Jai.
Yes, I would say the only requirement is really to have a passion that you want to put forward, and you just need the support and people to help foster this. As Jelicia just said, there's no language requirements. It's really just a drive and just present that information when you are applying in your questions and answering it to how you naturally feel, and you get the response that you need, and you'll be able to join CGIU.
All right. So as we wrap, thank you so much to Jelicia Ross, who's a 2016 graduate of Howard University with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, all right, COAS, in her early career, which I thought was hilarious because you're young, you're really young. So I'm with you though, with that early career, she advised government and public sector leaders across more than five federal agencies on short and long-term analytics and business process re-engineering efforts, in addition to providing pro bono management consulting services to locally based nonprofit organizations. Jelicia is also an urban farmer at Patchwork City Farms in Atlanta, Georgia, and continues to utilize her personal experiences and career lessons that she learned at Howard and CGIU to help people scale their ideas and to promote holistic wellness in her community. Thank you so much for joining us, Jelicia. Tah-Jai Sharpe is a recent graduate of Howard, as he's told you, with a bachelor's in biology and psychology and minor in chemistry and classical civilization. So I'm so there for your interdisciplinarity, so there. He's originally from Kingston, Jamaica. His interests are in epigenetics, and the provost is excited about this, I'm sure, because the provost is an epigenetics geneticist himself. And global health equity for underserved communities. He's a proud founder and CEO of Mentoring Youth and Teens Health, which is a nonprofit organization he started during his freshman year at Howard with a keen goal to combine mental health and mentorship for youth. He's currently an associate at the Society for Neuroscience, a global health solutions consultant intern at the Albright Stonebridge Group, and laboratory assessor. So we're really glad that you took 30 minutes out. We actually had to adjust the time to make sure that you could not get in trouble at work. So thank you for taking the time out and for joining us today and for introducing some new students to CGIU, and then to show how the work that and the leadership skills that you acquired in both places continue to serve you extremely well. Thank you both so much. And I'll turn now to our provost, who was wonderful enough to organize or to recommend organizing this conference. And then we'll close with the video announcing the 2021 spring meeting for CGIU. Thanks, guys. Provost Musa.
And thank you, Dean Williams. I want to acknowledge you and Dean Holly Walker also for really taking the lead in organizing this important conference. And I certainly want to thank Jelicia and Tah-Jai for their input and their comments as panelists. Is certainly refreshing to hear them reflect on how their experience at Howard has helped prepare them at this point in their careers. And we're very grateful for this opportunity we've had to interact with the Clinton Global Initiative University, and what their engagement and what the pandemic also reminds us of is how we are in an increasingly interdependent global world, and the things that we need to do to make sure that we're prepared to engage internationally to address not just global opportunities, but global challenges that we are facing. Even as in this country, we're dealing with the reckoning of systemic racism, it has been interesting to see people of color around the world rally to be supportive of what we're dealing with in this country. And so the increasing interdisciplinarity, increasing internationalization and globalization is the world that we're in and that we're going to continue to increasingly be a part of. And so I certainly want to thank our young alums for what they're doing to help make this world a better place, not just for those of us in the United States, but globally. Thank you again. Thank you, Dean Williams. And it certainly has been a pleasure to be able to hear and participate in the session this morning.
As the Howard University community celebrates homecoming, I'm excited and proud to announce that CGIU will be partnering with Howard as the virtual host campus for our 2021 meeting next spring. We'll be announcing dates and sharing additional details in the coming weeks. But in the meantime, any college student around the world can log on to cgiu.org to make a commitment to action and submit an application to be part of our CGIU 2021 cohort. Those who are accepted into the CGIU class of 2021 will join a diverse and growing community of young leaders and have access to a wide range of mentorship, networking, and funding opportunities throughout the year. Howard has a long and remarkable history of producing leaders across all fields and a deep, ongoing commitment both to social justice and social innovation. It's a university that invites students to directly address challenges such as food insecurity, health disparities, climate change, and income inequality through real-world programming. Students from Howard and many other historically Black colleges and universities have been a very important part of CGIU from the beginning. And all of us at the foundation are proud to work with President Frederick and the entire Howard community to bring this event to life. I'm looking forward to a great meeting and to seeing all the commitments to action the CGIU class of 2021 will come up with to make our world a better place.
Thank you all so much for joining today's panel with CGIU and Howard University alum. And we invite you to join many of the other panels that are happening today and additional panels that are happening tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us. And please, please sign in for other sessions. To learn more about the other sessions and to get the login information, visit www.howard.edu/homecoming. Thank you, and please stay healthy and stay safe.